Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of teissTalk with me, your host, Jenny Radcliffe. Today's show is all about instant response. How can we maximise our instant response plans? What can we do to make them better? What gets missed out? I've got a cracking panel joining me today to talk all about it. We've got Tim Erridge, who's the Vice President of Services at EMEA for Palo Alto. We've got Joe Hancock, who's partner non-lawyer, head of MDR Cyber at Mishcon de Reya. And we've got Lee Howard, who's Associate Director of Cybersecurity at Grant Thornton UK. And in a minute, I'll be joined by a friend of the show, Roland Cloutier, who is the Global CSO at teissTalk. I want to say good afternoon to everybody out there, to all my Tuesday teissTalkers. How are we all? Joined today again by my teissTalk dinosaur, which I think we named What a Lot of Logs Are Done last week. Happy to hear other names. And you have to help me persuade the teissTalk production team that you want dinosaurs, not mugs. Otherwise, you're going to get a mug. And for the best questions today, there's a mug or a dino. So there we go. So before we get into anything else, don't forget that you can ask me lots of questions. You can ask our lovely panel questions today about instant response or any topic that comes up. They'll be happy to answer it, and the best and most engagement might win one or the other, dino or mug. Happy to do that. So let's get stuck into it. I'm going to welcome to the show, friend of the show, Roland Cloutier, who is the Global CSO at teissTalk. Hi, Roland. Nice to see you.
Hey, Jenny. It's awesome being here. Thanks for having me again.
No, it's our pleasure, Roland. It's our pleasure. And today we are going to be talking about incident response and all about putting the humans at the center of it. And the first thing I'm going to ask you to comment on, Roland, is our article of the day. So let's see that for teissTalk Hunter. Oh, look at that. Almost like we planned it, Roland. So this was an article a couple of days ago in InfoSec magazine by James Coker. And it was it's talking about putting humans at the center of instant response. There's a couple of people speaking at RSA saying people matter the most in instant response. The incident response should be people-centric as per the NIST guidelines, Roland. Urging companies to share information after a breach, arguing that this is the most crucial stage, saying industry is slow to learn from the experiences and mistakes of their peers. What were your thoughts on that? I thought that was not radical, but I'm not sure anyone said it at such a big stage quite so directly before.
Yeah, Jenny, we focus so much time and effort on the automation and the technology and the collection of information, our ability to understand what's going on in our environment. Sometimes we do forget about the people. And I just think it's a great reminder because at the end of the day, it's all about context. Whether it's context and what's coming out of the platform and the systems to understand what's happening in your environment, it's context on the significance of the issue or the incident, or it's context on how to respond for a business. That all takes people. And computers and ML and AI is not going to give you contextual assurance as you're driving to remediate a problem, in your company, business agency, or what have you. So I think they're spot on. I mean, people are going to have to handle, understand, manage, and make decisions based on what is ever happening in their environment. And, when it was just viruses or malware, like when I started, that was great, but now we're cross-business impacting business resiliency issues. We have financial crime issues. You have, our cyber and converged security programs in many different companies handling people issues. And so how we respond to these and continue to develop has to have a people-centric, centered approach.
Yeah, I thought so too. I think you're absolutely right. And I think it was refreshing, for them to say that about IR, because I think we hear about it, saying humans on awareness and everything else. But for I think the guys were from Proofpoint and they came out and they said, this has got to be people-centric. If it's not people-centric, we're behind. I just thought it was refreshing to hear it said on such a technical topic, really, in such a big stage.
Yeah, I think it was responsible of them. And I think it also helps newer practitioners coming in, understanding, the historical representation of what really has to happen. It's tools plus people equals action. And it was great. And it was a big stage. And I'm happy for the team that they got so much press on it too.
Well, me too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the rest of the panel earlier than normal. I'm going to bring them in a minute, if that's okay. If I'm going to wake them all up now, they probably thought they had a few minutes just to comment on this article, because I know in our prep we were all in agreement. I'm just interested to see. So can I welcome to the stage Lee Howard from Grant Thornton, Joe Hancock from Mishkondareya, and Tim Eridge from Palo Alto, who are also our sponsors today. Thanks to them. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello, Jenny.
Hey. So first of all, let's maybe come to Tim first. Tim, what were your thoughts on this article, putting people at the centre of incident response? Do you agree with Roland that it was timely, and kudos to the guys for bringing it up at RSA?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with Roland and what he just said at the end, right? People plus tools equals action, right? It is at the epicenter of what an incident response needs to be about. I run a team of incident responders. I don't run a team of robots, right? I run a team of humans, and if a tool in isolation was the answer, then none of us probably be here. You'd have a panel of robots, right, or a panel of software code. It's absolutely important that humans are at the center of this. Cyber is very much a people problem, and it's often overly emphasized on the technology side of things, right? And the only thing I'd add to what Roland said in that equation is also data, right? Intelligence. You need data to carve out intelligence and insight, and people come inherently with an experience set and a skill set, and it's the people in my team that have experience that helps a client when they're having an incident. It's not necessarily the tool. You could take a really experienced incident responder and they could actually achieve the same outcome with a variety of tools, right? And it's because they've seen that incident before. They know how to coach a client organization through it for the best result. And that is not codified into any one single product or technology out there today.
No, and never will be, really. I mean, Lee, what did you think about the comments about they urge companies to share information after breach? Said this is the most crucial stage, but also said, Lee, the industry is slow to learn from experience and mistakes of their peers. Do you think that's still the case?
I think it's changing. I think it's a cultural issue whereby people were almost afraid to admit defeat. If there'd been an incident, if there'd been a breach, what does that mean to us from a credibility perspective? What does that mean to our team, our controls, our, whatever it may be from a performance perspective? It's different when you think about. I've worked in government in the past, and the government was, quite good at sharing crucial information with each other because wanting to look after each other, and there's the sum of the parts are greater than any one individual component. So I think as we see the frequency, and we are naturally we're seeing the frequency of incidents increasing globally, I think there's going to be an organic growth in the sharing of that information so we can best defend against those incidents.
I think there's got to be, hasn't there? I think that's the only way forward. I mean, Joe, what were your thoughts? They also emphasised tabletop exercises, but mostly to test the lines of communications.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was one of those articles where it'd be very difficult to say the opposite.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone could credibly say that humans aren't crucial incident response and we should all be replaced by robots, although, I'm sure there might be some upsides to it. I mean, on the kind of tabletop exercise kind of things, I mean, again, we're kind of back to incident response 101 now. Have a plan, make sure that plan is tested before it, has its first contact with a real kind of incident. That's, to me, is where all the good kind of learning comes from, and also where you kind of learn about people. I'd have actually liked to see the article go a bit further and really deal with some of the people issues in incident response, as opposed to just saying people are important. So I think they're going to go a bit further. Can't argue the tabletop point at all. It's where those real learnings kind of come from.
Well, I think that, I couldn't agree more. And you know what? We can go a bit further because we've got the whole panel today and we are talking about incident response plans. So we can unpack it, Joe. You've kind of set yourself up there for me to go, okay, Joe, so we wanted to unpack it. But yes, I mean, all around, sometimes we get articles, we pick an article for the show and it really just tells us what we want to know. And even though this one did, I think it was just such a timely reminder of what was important. So it's in the chat. It was in Info Security magazine, and it's putting humans at the center of instant response, leading us very nicely into today's topic about maximizing the effectiveness of incident response plans. Now, my kind of first question to all of you was all about what you think makes a good incident response plan. I think you kind of sort of answered it already, but maybe if there's anything to add, let's go to Roland first, seeing as we're quite a big panel today, and I start with you, Roland. I mean, what do we need to include? Has this evolved recently in recent years, incident response?
Yeah, I'll stay away from some of the technical stuff because I know the team can probably dive into a lot of their areas there. I want to talk about the people aspects for a little bit because that's what this article is about. When many of us started in the IR space, it was things coming out of the NOC or the SOC over to an IR team to go do a deep dive. Maybe it came from some insider team, if you're working in the government space. But today it's totally different. I mean, what do we do today? It's business operations protection. We're really protecting an organization. And in order to do that and understand the downstream residual impact of an incident to an organization, you have to involve that organization. So where it was just technologists, maybe IT, security, networking, folks of that nature involved, maybe the CIO stopped in. The reality is you're going to have everyone and their brother as part of this. You have to have your partners in privacy in general counsel's office. You have to have folks from HR to understand the internal impacts. You have to have people from customer support potentially. If you have an outage and you have to stand up an entire, cold environment to support all the calls inbound. You're going to have your outside third-party response support teams there as well. So I think part of your incident response is who is going to be there and why. And this really goes back to what Lee was saying around, you got to train hard, fight hard. And when you do these type of training things, it's part of your planning. You have to have those partners involved. They have to understand their role. You have to understand the capabilities of your team and where that stops. And of course, predominantly, we're all multinational organizations just by the way, the world and the internet is built. So who's going to do some of this work for you? Maybe not in the jurisdiction you're sitting in. How are you going to respond globally, but locally in if you're in Europe, in the United States for you, or in Southeast Asia, or wherever you may be. So thinking about your partners, your partnerships, and your internal stakeholders has to be at the top of your list when redeveloping your IR plan for today's issues.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I can see Tim nodding away there. You would agree then, Tim, particularly that global perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the, I think one of the most common, if you think about it, we do a lot of incident response, right? And then we try and take the client through lessons learned. It's a really important way of extracting the full value and turning an incident into opportunity, right? And I think I really like the phraseology in the article, which was learning from others, experiences and mistakes, if you want to call them mistakes, right, that have led to, an incident unfolding. Absolutely, we want to harvest that intelligence, replay it through an organization in a proactive and safe capacity, where you also can, you're going back to the human aspects, right? I had a great phrase from an old person in my team that used to say that the day of the dance is not the day to learn to dance, right? You don't want to be learning whilst you're going under by fire in a real environment, in production systems, etc., etc. So it's a great way to give both like technical safety, but also psychological safety, right? Your team members can ask questions, they can make assumptions, they can make mistakes in a way where it's not actually impactful. So it's a great way to sort of really expand the awareness with your practitioners. But to Roland's point, it's not just your practitioners. It's not just that traditional IR team, CERT team, the SOC. It's legal counsel. It's outside stakeholders.
Yeah.
And knowing your stakeholder map and knowing who needs to be communicated with and when is also equally important. You don't bring everybody in a state of emergency on day one, because that could be as costly.
No, it's pandemonium,
right?
depending on the size of the instance. And I completely agree with you, particularly in the case of ransomware. And I say this all the time, but that room is packed. You know, you've got legal in there. You've potentially got law enforcement. I mean, just looking at Roland. I'm going to come to Lee and Joe in a minute. Just looking at Roland. If it's a huge incident, and I'm not expecting either of you to comment or any of you to comment, but if it's a huge incident, you can have, you know, very senior law enforcement, even, you know, intelligence services in the room with you. And I've been there, and it can be pandemonium. I'm interested, though, in what Lee and Joe have to say about this as well, because Lee, I mean, coming to you next, and just because I'm going around the order of my screen, it's evolved, hasn't it? And it's continuing to evolve. The whole idea of what we need to include and who we need to include. I mean, I guess you're on the same page as Roland and Tim in terms of stakeholders.
Yes, I am absolutely, and I don't think that has changed that much in the last, say, 10 years in comparison to how technology to help detect and respond to this may have changed. I think what's important in the saying that I always come back to is there should be, and we're talking about incident response, but you know, you got major incident response and obviously crisis management beyond that as well. But throughout the whole organisation for a major incident, there should be a degree of situational awareness. So the guys on the ground, so the guys and girls at the very top, degree of situational awareness and concurrent activity, because everyone has got their part to play in incident response. And the way I've seen it best, you know, from a people perspective, the people on the ground who are responding to the incident, effectively what you want to see is just one-way traffic coming out from them. They're given situational updates and reporting to exactly what's going on the ground. The people around them in those key areas that Roland described earlier, and those key stakeholders, they should have the muscle memory to understand what to do when that information and communication reaches their desk, because that's what the operational teams need. In my own experience, where I've seen it go wrong is where not everyone has that understanding of where they sit in the crisis management, and you know, the person at the top tries to come down the long screwdriver and start making decisions in an operational space, and it's having that clear stakeholder map and understanding in a crisis management of roles and responsibilities. So I think getting back to the people aspect, that's why it's so important. The stakeholders haven't changed. The technology might have changed, but it's having everyone understanding what their role is and their part to play in a major incident response plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was why I said, all right, one of the main things I took from the article was that they were talking about doing tabletop, but to test those lines of communication, as opposed to anything else, which is kind of
and it gets back to even, you know, the more sophisticated attacks will go to close out those communication networks, won't they? So they, you know, they're trying to choke off that communication. So even we used to employ a PACE model, you know, primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. Mature setups, but like I say, the more sophisticated attacks will look to strangle that communication network to ensue chaos.
Yeah, and just the FUD at that point, isn't it? Really,
yeah.
Joe, what would you say to all of this? I mean, you're listening in. You said quite rightly you were interested in the human side and unpacking it. I mean, that's really the answers keep coming back to the humans, don't they?
Totally, yeah. And it's interesting because I always say that as an organisation, we don't do incident response. We do crisis management for cyber incidents, because, you know, by the time we get involved, we are, you know, kind of the glue that's sat in between all of those kind of pieces, and frankly, between all of those kind of people. And I in incidents, I have found more times than not, you know, to kind of Lee's point, my job is to defend the technical team or the team that's trying to get on and do their job, while, as you said, a long screwdriver, which is something that resonates with me very strongly. You know, or seagull management might be another way of calling it for those who've heard that term before. You know, you're basically trying to effectively defend one team from another. You know, the exec team that want their update every hour, and the forensics team, for example, that want to get on and do some forensicating. And you know, I think that people are both the strength and the weakness in incidents. They're the strength because, you know, well-trained incident responders and just an organisation, even with a bit of muscle memory around incident response, can pull miracles out the back, can do things that would never have been possible in normal circumstances. But also they're remarkably fragile. And there's a human cost to some of these things. And, you know, I dealt with long-running incidents where people just can't keep running at a certain tempo for a certain length of time. Very often, you know, you sometimes, it's very easy to forget what you're asking people to do during an incident. You're not asking them, especially during a crisis, to do their day job. You're not asking them to, you know, to do what they normally do. You're asking them to take on a highly stressful kind of role. So for me, that whole kind of crisis piece, there's a whole load of, frankly, human emotion under it that I think kind of, to a certain degree, gets kind of glossed over, because that doesn't even come out during a tabletop. It sometimes only comes out during the real thing.
Yeah, I mean, Roland, I know that you've spoken about crisis management in the past. So do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I love all these comments because it builds up to the same thing. There are frameworks that people can learn from here, right? There are, and it doesn't matter what part of the world you are. There are, whether it's FEMA SIMS, the, crisis incident management systems, or it's, any of the ISO standards. This is a great way to train. A lot of times we train on our run books, our incident books, and how to respond during those things. But what we're not training on, really, to Joe's point, is crisis management. And so when you start training your teams and you go in both directions on incident management, and you have teams that are set up for technical, you have teams that are set up for finance, you have teams that are set up for executive leadership. People know the roles that they're supposed to play, and it's an easy playbook, and you can pull them out for every single issue that you're dealing with. So it doesn't matter if it's ransomware, malware. It doesn't matter if it's a data center fire. It doesn't matter, because you're going to follow the same framework, and they know that they have a mission, they have a job to be able to do that. And another great tip is switch it up for your leadership teams. Listen, if you're you're an IR leader, a CISO listening to this, what's great is someone that's running your technical security engineering organization doesn't have to play that every single time. When you're doing your internal tabletops, switch their jobs. Make them feel the pain of the partner sitting next to them. Have them fill in for the IT person, right? You're not in security today. You're the IT help desk lead. And that's what you're going to do. Make them work together, partnering with each other to go through a crisis in a different position. You solve two things. One is they'll have more empathy for their partners in the process. And number two, you'll have backups. If someone goes down, they can't take the pressure, they get sick, they're not there, they're on holiday or vacation. Now you have someone that's done that job before as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can't emphasize enough how much I agree with that, and that cross-pollination of roles, and just sitting people in other people's department. That idea of this room is this department and that department. I just think it's really out of date with the way that we're all working right now. Let me go to a couple of questions that we've got in our Q&A for you guys. One here from Alan. He says, a real concern for me is the rise in the number of incidents, e.g. ransomware, reaching virgins, no prior breach experience. You then turn to experts such as MDR Cyber via their retained legal counsel, perhaps. There are too few of the latter to serve the volume of concurrent incidents. What lessons post-SolarWinds? How have the CAR providers scaled up since last December 21? What do we think about that one? I can see Tim grinning. Maybe we'll come to you first, Tim, and then to Lee and Joe, and maybe Roland at the end there. Tim.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote something back in the chat, and just to echo that. So the absolutely great point, and one of the biggest challenges that we all face, whatever part of cyber we work in, is this skill shortage, right? And the MDR providers, there's not enough of them, and they aren't at the scale they'd like to be, and we're internal teams and internal SOCs have never got enough resources in our experience, and in my own team, right, I'm desperate for more people. So it is a challenge, and that contrary, I guess, to the point that we started with, is that there is technology that can help with that, right? So having the right controls in place, having the right stack, having it optimized, having it finely tuned, having the right intelligence going into what you're doing, having automation and orchestration to really eradicate the mundane and the laborious tasks that can be safely and scalably automated, to allow the rare few people that you've got to focus in on doing the really challenging and complex aspects of incident response and cyber in general is really important. And to this final point of how are firms scaling up, absolutely, we do everything we can to bring new talent into the industry, to try and find new pockets of resources that you can upskill and in at pace. But it is really all about taking the intelligence that can be gleaned from insights at the front lines of cyber attacks through incident response, and codifying that into ways that can be leveraged across not just technology but people. Big calling is strategic intelligence. CISOs want to understand, they want to walk a mile in another. To the point Roland was just making, a CISO in one organization wants to live through the incident another one's just suffered, but without actually suffering it at their organization. Right? So it is all about making sure that intelligence can be shared and consumed, because I think too often it's just bits and bytes and IOCs and IOAs. It's not a well-crafted attack path, timeline of events, something that can be recreated and simulated in a tabletop manner.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder, when you're talking there about strategic intelligence, maybe I'll come to Joe and Lee on this one. We talk about strategic intelligence, and I just wonder, given Alan's point about there's not enough people, the amount of incidents concurrently is really swamping everyone. I always wonder about containment and whether we're stuck in that kind of short-term stick and plaster phase just because of resources. I mean, let's go to Lee first. What do you think? We have the time to be strategic and long-term? SMEs, for example, or are we still in that short-term containment phase?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question, isn't it? And you see a variety of flavors and maturity, certainly when it comes to strategic intelligence and threat hunting and other bits and pieces. I think for me, I've seen it a lot of times where we talk about risk appetite to the perceived threat. I would argue a lot of the time it's more risk ignorance. It's like getting in the car and not putting your seatbelt on. I think that's just ignorance of quite an obvious threat that's out there. And it's playing it off the appetite to said risk and understanding, well, do we fully understand what our profile is as an organization? Do we really truly understand the likelihood of the threat and the severity that we're facing externally? And I think there's what I'm getting at here. I think there's an education piece to the powers that be who give those operational teams that funding, and I think we probably need to do more as senior management representatives and professionals in that sector to create that understanding, certainly at the finance levels of organizations. Say, like I say, you're driving down the road in the car, you would have your seatbelt on, right? Because we're all aware of what that potential threat is, and I think it's the education piece that then drives that level of investment and maturity in the response capabilities.
Yeah, I think it must be right. I mean, Joe, what would you like to add on this whole idea of strategy and evolution and just whether we've got enough people?
Well, I've got slightly controversial views on strategic intelligence, which I'm no, they're not that controversial. I think as an industry, we've become a bit addicted to operational and tactical intelligence, and the reason for that is because it's easy and everyone provides it. And so you can really easily get a stream of IOCs and think you're doing intelligence. Yeah. And then you can get a yearly threat report for your sector and think you're doing strategic intelligence. And I'd argue that neither of them is particularly actionable. And and a team, the alternative of that is that you get intelligence that's pitched at the right level, means you can make business decisions, budgetary decisions, architectural decisions, priority decisions. And that's it's truly strategic intelligence. And off the back of an incident, I often see those kind of lessons go completely kind of ignored. Everyone about the vulnerability, these are the issue. And actually one of the teams I think does this very well is actually Tim. I think your team does a really good job of publishing. You look at the wider kind of more strategic, generally actionable intelligence, things you can take away from the incident, say, you know what, I'm going to make a change today. I'm going to change a priority, which is really what strategic intelligence is. But no, I think too many PDFs of a whole load of IP addresses in the back end. We've all been there. And hey, I'm doing intelligence. I'm protected now. I've blocked those.
Do you know what, Joe? This is such a brilliant point, and it kind of taps into what we were talking about a little bit earlier about the non-technical people in the CERT. Because what I'm thinking is one of the problems with this lack of strategic view comes at the debrief, comes at the review stage, because I'm not sure that those non-technical people are involved as much as they should be in that stage. Would you say that was true? I mean, Joe's not. Let's make Joe. I mean, just because it was your point, and then I'll go around the screen. But I mean, is that part of it, that we bring them in for the tabletop, but when something happens, we don't debrief?
Yeah, totally. I think there's a deeper issue, which is too many technical teams have this idea of the business like it's another thing they're not part of that exists somewhere outside, and it's
we wish sometimes. I think.
Well, yeah, that's fair. Yeah. It's mildly inconvenient, and so I'll bring it into this nice structured way when I can. I'll bring it when I have to go to legal. But you know what? This is an us thing. We're going to talk about what we did right, but also what we did wrong. And I don't want to have those people in the room when I say, hey, you know what, my team stuffed up, because actually some of those people might be the budget holders for this. And so, yeah, I totally agree that, you know, this, I hate to use the word holistic, you know, someone's probably got that on buzzword bingo, but we do need, you know, people who truly represent the organization you work for, not just, hey, we've got the incident response team and let's all pat ourselves on the back. Or let's all, you know, critique what we did. You really need to know how that impacted everyone else. So, yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I mean, Roland, I could just see you going, oh, yes, this is what I mean.
Yeah, you know, it is so funny you said, because a lot of us just come from that, originally from that space in life. But it's the maturity of the entirety of the organization that makes IR really live the dream today if you can do it. Like, if you can engage your risk team, right? So let's look at it. You're sitting down and you look at what are the things I have to prepare for, what are the things I have to tabletop for, and you come up with your top 5, 10, 20 things, right? I've never met anyone that has actually done 20 tabletops for their top 20 priorities, but just say it's the top 10. Is your risk team engaged in that top 10, and have they measured why it's your top 10? Did they actually come up with a number for you? Not involving them is more problematic than involving them, right? Because you're wasting time if you can't actually articulate it back to the business. And when you think about how we're going to respond to those things, why we're responding to those things, and being able to explain it to the business, risk plays a really, really important part of that. It also gets to the investment in your people and in your resources. So really going back to Tim's spot, we can't all prepare for 100% of all of these. Like, if you have a forensics team, you're lucky. And if you have 2 to 5 people in your forensics team globally, you're wicked lucky. But yet they still can't learn everything they have to do just for those top 10, right? You're going to have to find people in different areas. So a tip I like to talk to, you know, different teams about is start thinking about theaters of operation, right? Lee and I were in the government, and we know how different governments work. You have, you know, the Americas, or, you know, EU or Eastern Europe, or, you know, Southwest Asia, however you want to break them up.
Yeah.
What is your skill set there? Measure it. Measure your capability for the top 20 jobs that comes in, those top 10 issues that you have to respond to. Do you have the capabilities or not? Who will you go to during an incident for those capabilities in each one of those regions? Because you're probably going to have, you know, a different partner depending on the size of your organization.
That's so true. You tailor it to the culture and to who you've got in post. I agree. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, absolutely. I mean, there are legalities involved, there's culture involved, and there's on the ground capabilities involved. And you got to think of all of those things.
Well, I've got some comments, you know, got a really engaged Tuesday teissTalkers today, all very engaged. You did say holistic, Joe, and you did say, oh no, I've said holistic. And we've got the king of Buzzword Bingo, Mr. Coulson, on, and he has taken a drink because of that. We've got a few nice comments here. We've got Ugo saying, sometimes key staff may not be engaged during the instant response activity, and that will impact on how the response is managed, which is true. We've got Mark saying cross-training and empathy is key. Alan saying there's a real risk of burnout at the people end of things. Risk ignorance as well as risk fatigue coming there from Stuart. Really like the ignorance of risk, says Raza. When is it common sense? We totally agree. The comments of our panel, this is an excellent panel. And Alan again, Thai people make mistakes, repetition leads to complacency. The old days where a crisis incident was rare, black swan events are gone. It's time just to interrupt our brilliant discussions today. Really enjoying this. I knew we'd have a great panel on instant response today. Just to do a quick reminder that teissTalk Live is in London on September the 8th with both me and Thursday's host Jeff White, hosting live sessions of all your favourite teissTalk topics and events with lots of mugs, I'm sure, and maybe even the odd dinosaur. And also to ask you just a quick question. for our poll, which if our teissTalk Hunter could just put it up for me just a second, which is whether your non-technical people are involved in the debriefing session as much as they are in tabletop exercises. So do you involve your non-technical staff in the debriefing exercise as much as they are in tabletop exercises? That's over on the right-hand side to our teissTalk audience to vote on in the poll. Just a quick yes or no, just to see whether or not we are involving people in that back end, that review stage of the process. So the poll is open. Please vote now. And let's just get a little bit back to some of these questions from our panel. Now, we've got 10 minutes left of teissTalk. I can tell that we could talk about this for a very long time. So let's see if we can see some of these little comments. We've got one here from Ugo who says, if you lack the required skills in your instant response team, do you think your strategy should include outsourcing aspects of the work to a trusted third party? Maybe Lee first. Do you think that we should outsource some aspects of the work to a trusted third party? And then I'll come around the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. I think if to the question directly, if you haven't got it in house, then outsource and go out of house. Some response and some capability is better than not having that capability. And I think actually for mid-size enterprises and maybe less mature enterprises, it's actually a more effective and cost-effective and solution-effective approach to doing incident response. So we're seeing a lot out there in the market with operation centers and incident response functions, whether it's the forensic, whether it's the actual analyst and security operations centers, and following the sun, giving that 24/7 coverage. Yeah, I don't see any issues with that. I think it's a nice to have if you have an in-house function, and I think for some teams and maybe some executive members, it gives a warm fuzzy feeling that there's someone there they can grab and hold and shake maybe. But I think that's in a lot of organisations a bit of a luxury, to be honest with you. So yeah, I don't see a problem with it at all.
Okay, well, I mean, and let's go for another question. Maybe this one. I'm just trying to think who'd like to answer this one. Let's maybe go to I guess Joe on this one, maybe, because I've got one lined up, but I know Roland would be keen to answer. From Victoria, she says, how do we get others on board with tabletop exercises and simulations when incident response efforts has always been deemed sufficient because key people make themselves available even when sick or on leave? So I suppose the question, Joe, is how do we get those everyone on board when it's so difficult just to even get, the people say, well, you keep people involved, why do I need to be there? Have you got any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it comes back to tying it back to things that really matter in their world and their language. So, if you talk to the finance team about what the impact is going to be on their key systems, on the reports they produce, on the finances of the organization, they're much more likely to come and get involved than if you tell them they got to take part in an IT exercise. To me, it's kind of how you sell it. These things are an internal marketing job to a certain degree. But then there's also the point of actually, key people being always available, whether they're sick, whether they're on leave, because there's a crisis. To the point made earlier, actually changing these things up is really useful. Bringing the team together and then, to a certain degree, sending a quarter of them home is sometimes a good thing. It gives you that, you see how people act under stress. You see when people aren't there, because, to me, an organization that relies on people, coming in when they're off, when they're sick, those kind of things, actually is muddling through an incident. So you want to see some of that reality in the exercise. But no, I mean, my underlying point is it's in how you sell it internally. It's if you call it an IT response exercise, even if you call it an instant response exercise, that's going to switch a whole part of the business off. And again, I've used the business word, but you want people who are non-technical, who aren't close to cybersecurity, to really understand why this is important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a good point. It's like you've got to, I suppose we have to have that marketing mindset for things we need the business to come in on. as opposed to using anything too technical or anything else. Thanks for that, Joe. Brilliant answer to that question. I wanted to ask Roland this next one, which comes from Stuart, and he says, how do you cope in an instant where there's an embarrassment factor that you don't know what to do next? We've had an instant where we just didn't know what to do next. They didn't know where to go. Roland, I mean, you've years of experience in this and in large organisations. What thoughts have you got on that? Like, the team really feels overwhelmed, not sure what to do next, really.
So just because you don't know what to do next on the actual technical issue doesn't mean you don't know what to do. And that's when you're going to ask the right questions. You're going to be upfront, honest, direct, and say, this is a new issue. We haven't trained for this. We haven't seen this. We don't have technical experience here. We need to go to our partner who does this, or this, or we need to involve law enforcement, from the Home Office or from EU or from CERTIU that knows, these three things. They know how to deal with it. We're going to reach out to them now. We'll update you in 20 minutes when we've had contact with them. Like, being confident in your ability to handle the situation and go down the right path and having that Rolodex and managing through that is really the confidence that the business is looking at you for. You're the 911. Just because you don't know how to do CPR or something else doesn't mean you don't know how to handle the incident. And they're really looking for that crisis manager at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I see Tim nodding. Tim, I take it you'd agree with that. Have you got anything you'd add to that, Tim? I mean, you have a broad spectrum in your role of experience on this one. Anything to add? I mean, it can be difficult for a team to kind of handle it when it's a surprise or it goes in a way we're not expecting, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Roland's absolutely right in that it doesn't just because you're at a dead end. That's when you regroup, you get everyone together, and you start thinking around the problem, right? And it's not, you shouldn't be fatalist about it, and you shouldn't, just give up. And I'm sure no one would, but it's about having that Rolodex, as Roland described it, of who do I go to, where can I go for a source of inspiration whilst we're at this juncture, right? And absolutely, that would be specialist firms in my recommendation, right? That of that. The going back to one of the questions for Joe that he just answered, right, is if you're bringing in specialists, we coined a phrase like your first incident is our 5,000th, right? And that's what you're actually doing when you bring in specialists is they've more likely to have seen and experienced and got to that point that you're at now, and you're going, help. You bring in people that have been there before, and then they can help keep calm and carry on, and they can help take you through to the next part of the crisis or the incident management. And it's really important. And that also goes back to, right back to the beginning of this conversation, the article sharing of intelligence is really important because, and it can be shared in multiple ways, right? Intelligence is being shared by bringing in skilled and experienced professionals who have been there before, but it can also be shared in, just in strategic intelligence, or it can be shared in operational tactical intelligence, and and fine tuning your control environment. But absolutely, there's no substitute for having someone that you can turn to for advice in that moment where you're going, help. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And just from my own experience as a negotiator, that's true, particularly if the business decision from legal and everyone else is to negotiate. And, that is terrible. If you have not negotiated before, that's a crisis negotiation can be terrifying. It can be a very, very strange situation to be in. But if you bring a professional in, it's not the first time that we've done it. So, I would agree with that. Definitely.
Can I add just one thing?
Yeah, of course.
The other part of that is, and this is really, really key for this whole discussion, is preparation, right? If you have done your preparation, and by that I mean if you understand your environment, you understand your stakeholders, as we've described, and one really important factor is understanding your impacts, right? And you mentioned black swan event. I can recall quite a few years ago now, granted, but a risk manager in a financial institution saying to me, wiper malware causing an outage, that's a black swan event. We don't need to worry about that. That'll happen once in 10 years. And look where we are today, right?
Look where we are.
Attack is exactly what he dismissed out of hand. And so it's understanding the impacts that to your business, because then that also everything flows from there in terms of understanding, who do I need to have involved in the decision making process. Again, back to which business stakeholders do I bring in to do this exercise. You want to rehearse with the people that it affects. The worst thing you could do is start dragging in people from parts of the business to rehearse an exercise that wouldn't have an impact on them. No. Because then you're actually doing a disservice and you're just making the problem worse.
Absolutely. Well, listen, this has been an amazing panel today. I know that my Tuesday teissTalkers agree. We've got some fantastic comments. It was Alan that mentioned Black Swan events, and Alan, who is our flashheart. Hi, Alan. Know your enemy, but know yourself. Up in the chat. So I'm just going to come to you in a minute for some final words. If you've not, I think the poll will almost be closed. So if you haven't voted, get it in this next minute. But I'm going to go around just ask for some final thoughts from our fantastic panel about IR plans. I mean, final thoughts. I don't want to sort of pick on someone who would like to go first and give us some final thoughts on this topic before we close.
Yeah, I'm happy to, Jenny. I think 2 words. Complacency kills, right? In IR, it's a life cycle approach. Every year, every time your business changes, every time your organization changes, every time your threat surface changes, your IR needs to change. So Complacency kills. Get out there, do the hard work, and make sure you're ready for it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Roland. And thanks for being our opening guest today. Roland there, who's the global CSO of teissTalk. Joe, what about yourself? Any final closing thoughts very briefly? We're running out of time.
Again, I think just remembering the people side of IR and what you're asking people to do. It's really easy in the heat of the moment to forget that, we're dealing with humans with feelings here. And to Tim's point, where we're not all robots yet.
Oh, well, listen, thanks again for the comments. That was Joe, who is head of MDR Cyber at Mishkondareya. Lee, final thoughts, what to add, my friend? Oh, we can't hear Lee. Well, I can't hear Lee. And he's not on mute. Oh, what a shame. No, it seems to have gone out. I don't think it doesn't.
One more go.
There we go, Lee.
Right, okay. Very quickly then.
You're off and on again, right?
Yeah, exactly. Very quickly from me. I think in anything in life, there's a science and an art, and I think the technology provides the science and the people are the art to how we respond effectively to incidents.
Thank you so much.
I'll leave it on that.
Yeah, thanks for being brief, Lee. Really appreciate it. Tim, we sort of heard from you, so I'm not going to come to you for that final comment because we did hear from you. I just want to say thank you so much to my fantastic panel. Our poll, do we involve non-technical staff in the debriefing in the same way we involve in tabletop exercises? And our panel, our teissTalkers overwhelmingly say yes, they do. Best practice. Let's hope that that's always the way. In terms of our dinosaur versus mug debate, it's going to run on and on. But today, I think Victoria's question was amazing. So, Victoria, I am happy to award you either the dino or a mug. You need to let us know which one you are after. We will be in touch. Again, a huge big thank you to all of my panel, to Joe, to Lee, to Roland, and to Tim and Palo Alto for being our sponsors today. Thanks to the Tuesday teissTalkers. Don't forget at 4 o'clock on Thursday, you've got Jeff White's session, which I think is all about zero trust. And don't forget, book that place on teissTalk Live in London in September to see all of this live, a live event again. How fantastic. But for now, from me, thanks to all my panel and thanks to you. Thanks to the teissTalk team and goodbye for now.